if you can focus and execute from age of 20 to 30 on finding a problem, reading, getting mentors, doing, I feel like all the things I've been doing 30 to 40, I would set myself up for a life that I don't even know is possible or as I could even fathom.
Hey, welcome to Building Bigfoot, the podcast about growing yourself and growing your business profitably. I'm really excited here. I'm introducing Brad Redding. So Brad is, he's got an amazing company called Elevar, and it's really about conversion tracking. It's server-side conversion tracking. I know he's working with a lot of e-com companies through, all the different, tool suites that you would imagine that you need, and really making sure that you're getting those high-performance campaigns to getting your return on ad spend that you're looking for. Brad is also a really great guy. I've hung out with him a couple times, and every time I do hang out with you, Brad, I immediately think I want to spend more time with this guy. You're a very, very fun person, but you're also we share some of the same core values. We share health. You seem like you really do invest a lot of time in your family as well.
Yeah.
And that's very cool. So without further ado, Brad, would you be able to quickly introduce yourself, and then we can dive into your backstory?
Yeah. It's funny being the opposite end of these pods, where I'm not the interviewer, I'm the interviewee. So I'll keep the backstory. So I'm in, like Jonathan said, in the SaaS world. Have a SaaS business focused. We serve e-commerce brands, so think your direct to consumer brands. This is my second SaaS business. In between the two, I was in the agency world, and I said I'd never do a startup again. But that lasted 4 years, 364 days, I think, and then made the jump back into the startup world. And yeah, I mean, in terms of personal stuff, I have 2 young boys, 3 and 4-year-old boys, amazing wife, family, etc. And we live in Charleston, South Carolina, so we are on opposite end of the world, or the continent from where you are, but very much in the outdoor activities. We are super active, very health conscious. Doesn't mean we don't have fun. We have fun too, but we certainly prioritize health and wellness and make sure that is a big part of our family. So that's the 30,000 foot view on me.
Yeah, and you recently did a pretty significant competition, a health competition, outside of business. Your
Yeah.
business is also Inc. 5000, right?
Yeah, 2 years straight. Yep, 2 years on
That's
Inc. Yep.
amazing.
Yeah, and
Yeah, and you're serving some.
High Rocks is the fitness competition that my wife and I do, and some friends we do together. So we travel around, and it's pretty intense.
Yeah, that is pretty intense. I've seen you, like, you're very fit, you're very strong. And how did you get into that?
Our friend circle. I mean, that's honestly it was funny when COVID happened and we couldn't go to any gym. And we had recently moved a new house, so we didn't really have any equipment in our house either. I think we had one kettlebell and something else. So I had a walker, who's my oldest. I was like holding on to him, doing like push presses with him, holding on, doing squats. And it was a shock to us because it's the first time since I was probably 15 or 16 that I hadn't been to a gym in more than a week. Like literally, I've never gone more than a week in my life going to a gym, exercising. We could obviously run and do things like that outside, but if you remember, like really early COVID, it was like, don't leave your house, don't leave, don't do anywhere. So that's just a part of our day to day in our lives. And we got into High Rocks through a few friends who started doing it. And for me, since I've very like into sports, still play basketball, still do a lot of just sporting events where you're having to move and be athletic. But I was getting a little bit old of all right, let me go to Gold's Gym up the street and go think of my own workout and just do like more weightlifting. And I never really got into CrossFit. And High Rocks was a little bit of that mix of, okay, you need your endurance training, so you need to be able to run and run fast or for longer distances, compromised, where you're doing more maybe CrossFit like activities, but just functional activities. It was a competition. I'm super competitive. Reddings are competitive. That's in one of our like family brands. That is one quote I'll say with the boys is like, we're competitive. Like Reddings are athletes. Reddings are competitive. So I think that all together and just the community part of being able to train. So it's, training 3, 4, 5 months for an event. and then we travel and go to the event, we do it, and then we just have fun after and can come back and do it all over again.
So, fun fact, I just learned this recently. You say Reddings are competitive. The ing on Redding, ing means son of, and it's Saxon. And so my name's obviously Whiting, and
Yeah,
ing is the same thing. So we obviously have some Saxon heritage
yeah,
uh, that
yeah.
we both have that must go back like a couple thousand years or 1,000 years or something.
Interesting. Reminds me of what's that? What's the Netflix series where there's the sack? Is it Empire? I don't know. There's some Netflix series. It's a historical. It's a historical series, and Saxons were I think part of it.
Is that with Uhtred?
Yeah.
Last Kingdom. Yes. That show is awesome. I love that. That is super fascinating and just tons of fun to watch. My favorite movies are like Braveheart, Gladiator.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I love
that's
those.
yeah, those are great. So uh, stepping back here for a bit, you mentioned briefly the high level. So you were an entrepreneur, then you had an agency, and then or you're a startup entrepreneur, then you had an agency, then you were a startup entrepreneur again.
Yeah.
How did that all start? What got you into business originally? Were you always entrepreneurial, or is that something that developed um, throughout your career?
Yeah, so I would say partially entrepreneurial when I was younger, and I would do various things without going into specifics. No one's going to care about things I was doing when I was 13 or 15, 16. But early 20s, a few of my friends, they had started software and started their own business, and I think looking at them, it was like, holy cow, they're doing it. Why can't I do it? And that was really just the spark that led me down the path of a little bit corny, but I actually did have a dream in the middle of the night. I had a dream about a business. I woke up in the middle of a dream, got a notebook and started writing down a bunch of notes. And if you've ever done that before with dreams, you wake up the next morning and you read your notes from like what you're dreaming about. It's really weird because you're like, what? Like, how did you even have those thoughts? Like, because everyone who can remember dreams, it's just like you wake up and like, man, I had a really weird dream. Like, how did all those little connections come together? So I think that was again another spark for me to just lead me down the path of I'm just going to try it. It was very naive. I didn't go to business school. I was self teaching myself how to build things, program, and just learned a lot of hard lessons. But also I learned a lot of lessons of what it takes in at that point trying to build something that people outside your network will pay for. And from there it was I look at it as my MBA in entrepreneurship. It's okay. What are some of the big lessons I can extract from just trying to build something, spend all my money, waste a bunch of money, spend 4 years doing it. When I look back on that, it's like, what were the big learning lessons if I were to go about doing this again? So that to me is like the first 4 or 5 years getting into it. It was being motivated by my network. So who was around me? They were building a business that ended up being pretty successful with that, and having that spark of, okay, if I can do it, then getting started. And it's just JFDIing, is just doing it. Like just take one brick at a time, just go forward each step without worrying too much. I didn't even know what an exit was at that point. I just want to build a business and see if I can prove myself I could do it and make it. And then obviously it evolves. It's evolved since then, but those are the early years and how I got started.
What would be some of the lessons that you learned in the early stage that you sort of carry with you today?
Two, number one, need to have a plan to make money. It's not if they build it, they will come. Number two, need to have a brand. So need to have a brand that will support the growth of the business. Double tap on the financial side. The first version of Elevar, so our beta version of the product, we never did anything free. It was pay $50. I wanted to see if someone outside our network would come to Elevar and choose to pay $50 to try the beta. And then it was trying to, okay, how can we get someone to pay second month, a third month, a fourth month? So, and then the branding side, that's where a good friend of mine who owned another agency here in Charleston, where he was the first person that sat down just to go through Elevar, click a button. And they were a branding agency, a branding design agency. So it was a who, not how. Like, not how am I going to create the brand? It's a who's going to create the brand. without even knowing that Dan Sullivan had that book. I think it was Dan Sullivan, The Who Not How. But it was, okay, you guys, brand need that problem solved, and they crushed it. Did an amazing job.
Yeah.
So that was the two. Those are like my two big takeaways in the early days.
They did crush it. You've got an amazing brand. I love your brand. The two things is, number one is you have to be able to not just build it, but you need to build something that is going to basically get you customers.
Yeah,
And then you need to have a brand that's bigger than really sounds like the original starting point, so that as you grow, it can grow into that brand, or that brand can
yep,
develop into something much bigger.
yep.
What So then what kind of happened then? So after your first initial success with business, you realize, I can do this. This is something I can do. Where do you go from there?
In Elevar, or just in general?
Just in general. So before you started Elevar, like did you start Elevar from day one?
No, so Elevar is about 6 years old, but the concept of the money and branding, I didn't really know that or take that away until I was sitting down with the concept of, it was Insights Engine, and then we rebranded to Elevar, or it wasn't even rebrand. It was like we weren't even a legit business, but it was like, okay, this business is going to be Insights Engine. But that is when I sat down to look like, okay, how can I retrospect on the first time I did it, where all the normal stories of draining 401ks and doing all of that and working 16, 17 hours a day because you're doing two jobs to try to keep money coming in while you're not making any money in the startup. But what am I going to apply to this next at bat to increase the likelihood of success, where success is, I can start to make money, I can pay myself a real salary, I can start to build a team. So those are the early lessons. From there, from the last 6 years, 5 or 6 years with Elevar, and we're in the same mastermind together. So a lot of I've learned from being in Dan's group is you always need to look at yourself. So if you want to be this much in revenue, or have this big of a team, or have this impact on your industry, or have this aura with your customers, whatever it might be, is you need to develop that skill to look ahead and live in the future, and really start to dissect, okay, what are the traits of that person? What needs to be true of them and like today in order to get there? So that for me has been the last few years, is constantly looking at, how do I consistently change the way I approach my days, my weeks, my months, my attitude, and how do I live? Not even just from what Dan, like, I think I've always naturally done this, is how do I live in the future? So you like pull yourself into the future. So I think that's a big focus that anyone can take when you're trying to grow that business, build it. Doesn't matter if you're trying to go from 0 to 1 or 10 to 100. I think that same philosophy is going to apply.
Hmm. That's really interesting. So how do you pull yourself into the future?
Ironically, I'll say it like, if something as simple as like, oh, what's your revenue? And it'll be where I think we should be in 3 months or 6 months from now. Like, oh, we're 10 million. We're not, we're not 10 million, but I do actually I'll share that, even though it might be quote unquote fudging the numbers a little bit. And a lot of times it's in my head as well. So that's like the most basic example of, if someone's having a conversation and you're like, oh, where are you? It's like, oh, we're here. Not really, but you are.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So you're essentially projecting or stating where you are going to be, so that it becomes and starts to feel so real
Yeah.
that it just becomes a natural consequence that you're going to end up there.
Yeah, exactly.
And then by the time you're there, you're projecting another number.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
So you're always living in the future and then bringing it back into
yeah,
now. So then you're
yeah,
putting that framework of like what has to be true
yeah.
to then get there.
Same thing with health. So it's, what's your max mile? Like, how fast can you run a max mile? I don't know, 6.5 minutes. I probably won't go do that today, but I need to speak that into an existence.
Yes, yes, that makes total sense. I do a lot of obviously cycling and other kind of fitness stuff, and so yeah, that makes total sense. I would always
Yeah,
train based on what's my best 1 minute power,
yeah,
and then I just was, okay, now how do I link those 1 minutes together so that eventually that becomes the 20-minute power or the 40-minute power
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I can sustain.
Writing it down is another big one too. So writing it down in the 5-minute journal, which is sitting right in front of me, as another, I don't want habit that I picked up 3-4ish years ago. I don't write it in every single day, but I write it in it consistently enough where there's a part of it where it'll ask, like, it's a daily affirmations of describing who you are. The way I've used it is typically it's one business. So I've built this business, and the other part is a family, like a family. I'm a great husband, great father to my boys, etc. But it's so interesting when you go back and you just flip through the pages of 3, 4, 2 years. Like even last year, I'm such a different person. But if you go back 3 to 4 years, it's crazy that who I wanted to be then, like, oh my gosh, I was really aiming low. Like I'm way past that part. So writing down is another, I think for me, I found it very helpful because it was a little bit woo woo for me initially of like, does this really work? Like, should I do it? I just kept doing it. And yeah, I think looking back, I'm glad that I kept that habit.
That's really cool. I'm not using the 5-minute journal. I'm using this one called Yearly, that a guy I know, Sam McLaughlin, created.
Hmm.
And it's really cool because it essentially does the same thing. You set out like, what do you want to do for your yearly goal,
Yeah.
and then what are those non-negotiable habits that you're going to
Yep.
do every single week, that are going to get you there. And then they have sort of like a reflection process within it.
Yeah.
And I'm finding it really helpful. I never used the 5-minute journal, on a regular basis before.
Yeah.
I was never very consistent with it, and whereas now I'm getting a lot more consistent, I'm seeing the benefits of it right away,
Yeah.
and it sort of helps to clarify like what's really the most important thing this week,
Yeah.
even as we go.
Yeah.
Um, so so I wanted to ask you, I really do. I think the branding of Elevar, I like the name. I think it's a great name. Um, it's very good. So how do you in your team manage that? So you've got your podcast, you've got your LinkedIn profile, you're
Yeah.
obviously out there on your website. Um, how do you ensure that the quality of your brand is sustained through all of the different things that you're doing?
That's a great question. I would say on one hand, it's because we don't have a giant marketing team, so there's not as much of that need to have very rigid playbooks and processes and ensuring that everyone's following that. But we've taken a few steps through the years of we went through the character diamond from, I think, Ryan Dice. It might be public too, but it was one of the first trainings from SaaS Academy that I learned. So we went through that process, and even before that, we developed a character for Elevar. So it was just, what's the personality? Who is Elevar? What's Elevar's quirks? What's their North Star? Like all these different characteristics to try to build a voice. So we tried, or we did. We didn't try. We did build just sample voice paragraphs of what would Elevar say in this situation, or how would we respond in this situation. So it was talk tracks, not that we had to follow, but it was more of the inspiration. And we tried to tie Elevar to a movie character, to the personality of Elevar, tied to a movie character, to again just give people a non-structured, like, read this playbook and determine how Elevar is. It was okay, if you are familiar with this movie, then and you know the character, then just use that as your guiding principle. Today, we we do have a flywheel, so that prototypical flywheel of sharing the best how-to content, which has been Elevar since day one, the best how-to content in our industry. So it's very educational, very inspirational. And those are, I would say, the core pillars is be educational, be inspirational, be empathetic. So maybe 3 pillars. And we just try to carry that through. So it's more about just giving value, telling everyone everything that we learn. And just, I think, unfortunately, chips fall into place. We have a designer, so we do everything when it comes. If she sees a blog post or something that goes live or the imagery doesn't quite match up, she's great about just popping in, just changing it. So there's little small things like that without having to give direction. But I think it's more about the voice. To me, the voice and the voice of the brand, but also your customer success voice. is a big part of building your brand. To put it another way,
Yeah.
your customer support and customer success, they drive more of your brand than marketing.
Yes. And it makes a lot of sense. Um, for your brand, did you select the customer first, or did you select the um like how what was your approach there? Did you say, okay, this is who we're going to go after, or did you say this is how our voice is going to be, and then the voice has attracted the customer? Like, did you know who was going to end up being your target audience?
Yeah, customer first. So we built our ICPs first, tried to understand, okay, what resonates with them, what type of language, what do they read, what do they watch, and then develop the personality around that with our own flair, but certainly customer first, identifying who our ICPs are.
Okay, yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. And then um as you've gone along and you've solved this problem, server side trafficking, who knew it was going to be such a big deal?
Yeah.
But it is a very big deal, right?
Yeah.
Um so iOS 14.5 comes out about 2 years ago now, and the game of tracking changes. You got Google GA4 coming out, like just released a couple weeks ago or about a month ago.
Yeah.
And so this is a big update. How have you been able to have your finger on the pulse of what's happening and prepare for it?
Yeah, great question. We've done a really good job on our history of staying very close with our customers. So talking to them, listening to their pain points, but also listening to their wallets. So what are people willing what do people pay us for? What do we do that causes them to refer other people to us? And use that as our okay, because we actually started out as an analytics. So we would ingest analytics and do automated data analysis. Without getting the backstory of how we had pivoted, is that led us down the road of tracking accuracy, and people kept paying us more and more for okay, more tracking accuracy, and they refer people to us, and that's what they were coming to us for. And then we said, okay, well, maybe we don't really need this because no one's paying us for this, no one's referring other customers for this. So that I think to extract out the very specific of how Elevar stays on top of tracking updates and what blogs or events we go to try to stay ahead. At the end of the day, it just comes down to listening to customers, communicating with them, not just an advisory board, but everyone, pulling out support tickets. So what type of issues are coming in through support? Understanding demos. What are people saying in their discovery calls or demos or booking forms? How did they hear about us? Having that in their sign up so we can really understand why people are coming to us. What's the number one goal? So we in our sign up, we've had this for I think 3-ish years now. Everyone who signs up for Elevar, we have an open free form field that says what's your number one goal that you're trying to complete with Elevar today. So we can extract all that out and create a visual of okay, well, what are people coming to us for? What's changed this year compared to last year? These last 6 months. So at the end of the day, it's all voice of customer data, and that's what helps us drive the product.
Wow, that's a great tip. I'm gonna add that form field to ours, because we get a lot of that from, I'd say, the calls that we have with people in trial. But then it would be great to know, was that outcome because of the call, or what was the original outcome that they had when they were first looking into us, or maybe what was their friend talking about that caused them to sign up. Um, that's very, very interesting. The it's really cool to see, like, so you've done a great job solving this problem. Obviously, like, you got 99.9% accuracy, which is, I think, pretty commendable considering the challenges with tracking that have happened and how important that is. So if you're running any kind of advertising, um, the promise of the internet is that you can track your ROI. And then the internet has been moving away from that, essentially. And the large players, the big players, are making it harder and harder to track ROI. And we can talk about why that is, but some of it is simply because they're trying to increase user privacy. Some of it is because they're competitors with one another, and so Apple would like to make it a little bit tougher for Facebook. Um, And Google would like to be able to really own the customer cohort, and that makes sense, right? Like if you're in this position and you think, okay, we can do something disruptive, maybe beneficial to others, but at the same time put ourselves in the position where we are the number one source of information as a result. That's a good thing for them. But it's made it a lot harder for advertisers because now they're spending money, but their money isn't being as wisely allocated as it was before. And so you have to have some sort of attribution tracking that can tell you that my ad spend is doing what it said it's doing, because otherwise you're just throwing money into the wind. And it's really, really critical. And I see like why it would be so valuable in the e-com world. Like we service more the businesses that are looking to to serve more customers, and versus the e-com, which is really about you know a lot of product management and making sure that the right product's in front of the right person, and that you are able to move product quickly as possible. So it's a fascinating problem. And what are your thoughts on that? Like, what are your thoughts as far as the industry and why this has become such a um, an important topic in the last couple of years?
How much time do you have left on the pod? Because this is what I talk about all day. Jokes aside, but I think actually US too. So US has CCPA, so the GDPR of the US. You have all of that GDPR. It's happening outside of the US. So Europe, where it's an opt-in. So any website you go to, you have to choose whether you want to opt in to share your data. Part of me feels like there are some decisions that have been made, US or non-US, that they're made by folks or teams or committees or whatever it might be that are slightly out of touch of how the internet works or how it should work, because there are certain clauses in some of these regulations that it just doesn't, like, it feasibly, it won't work. Like, the internet has a certain way it functions, and some things that are being asked would cause the internet, part of the internet, just not to work. So slightly, maybe there's some out of touch aspects or visions of what all of the world of tracking can be. I think there is another part, which is growing malicious actors. So there are a lot of malicious actors that are doing things within tracking that even the site that's installing a tracking script may not know that that other tracker, like the piece of JavaScript that's been installed on the site, they're not doing. A good example here is Magento, which was an open source e-commerce platform, which I worked on for years before Shopify really exploded. Magento had a major problem where there were trackers that were scraping credit card information on the checkout because they were being injected. So the scrapers are being injected from another piece of JavaScript, which that's cross-site scripting and these other things that are some of the browsers that have the control to crack down on those. So that's the second part, where there are just bad actors that are forcing the hand of these bigger regulations or bigger browsers. And then there's likely some of the either competitive aspect or financial gain by building walled gardens within their own specific platforms, whether that's within Google or within iOS or whatever it might be. There's likely some competitive advantages to make things harder for the masses that could potentially increase the presence of, I'd say some of the bigger tech players, that they're not going to go out of business if they have a bad couple months of Facebook, where others might. So I think there's a mix of all that happening. Again, bad actors, potentially some competitive play, and then just, I would say, some policy making that's may not encapsulate for the entire greater good of the internet and technology as a whole.
Yeah, I think these open platforms, they're huge vulnerabilities. We see it with WordPress, we see it with a lot of these sites, and it's not that open source is inherently bad. It's that when a vulnerability is discovered,
Yeah.
it's discovered for all the open source platforms across the board, and so those sites are
Yeah.
having, or those platforms are having to stay up to
Yeah.
date all the time. I actually just hung out with one of the senior executives from Magento this week. Actually, he was on yeah, we're on this morning thing together, and I was chatting to him a little bit about it, and just how interesting it was to be part of that. And they had an explosive growth before being acquired by Adobe, and but it was same sort of thing. I'd say same position as you, which is like right place, right time, right problem. A lot of people are looking for the solution, and then realizing that the opportunity is actually a lot larger than they realized. And um, it's so with what you're doing now, how are you ensuring that the data is without giving away anything, but like how are you ensuring that that data is secure so that when people are transacting or tracking or attributing that it's essentially safe and private for people.
Yep. So we operate primarily on Shopify. So there are restrictions in place already. So we don't have access to the credit card fields or anything like that. We don't store credit card data per se, but if we just think conversions that are happening that can include some customer data like email, phone number, things like that are attached to a conversion, is there's things that we have to put in place. So going through SOC 2 and going through the certifications of simple things like, okay, data in transit is encrypted, and there's a host. I don't know if you've gone through SOC 2 in the past, but it's very much a privacy security protocol to help check the boxes that you're doing things that you need to be doing if you are transferring and processing data. On the GDPR and customer consent side, so we integrate with all of the major players for GDPR. So if our customers need to be GDPR compliant or they need to have cookie policies in place for California or some of the other states that have rolled out their own privacy policies, we integrate with them. So if someone is opted out, then we don't collect the data. So it's making sure that we integrate well with those privacy vendors, but also follow the guidelines that our platforms that we build on top of require of us. And then some of that, I would say the third party or independent auditing that one needs to go through just to validate that our tech stack and our processes are up to standard that many of large organizations will expect out of companies like us.
Yeah, no, that all makes a lot of again makes a lot of sense. And you're probably similar to us. Like we get audited every year by Facebook itself. It's the same. It's really important. I think um, if you are looking to set up a business these days, whether it's on Shopify or not, you don't think about all the compliance issues, but that compliance issues is hugely important when you're running a business today, and making sure you're kind of compliant out of the box by plugging in a tool like Elevar is amazing. It truly is. And then you're getting the great attribution built in. Um, I really do see what you guys are building, and I think you're just doing such a fantastic job. Um, so just a little bit more back onto your backstory. So you how did Elevar start? Is you and another founder?
Yeah, so there were three of us when we started, and Elevar started just like most other businesses do. You are likely working somewhere else, doing something else. You see a problem that can be, at least my mind is like, okay, this is a problem that could be automated. So is data analysis, like the manual pulling of analytics data and trying to slice and dice it was very manual, time consuming, et cetera. So the concept was, okay, let's figure out a way to automate that. So our customers can spend 80% of the time thinking about strategy and optimization versus 80% of the time on pulling data and analyzing it. And that was really the core. That was the core initial concept of problem, very manual. Can it be automated? Yes. How do we automate it? Let's figure it out and test it out and then put it to market and give feedback. And then everything I mentioned previously is just listening to customers, really working hard over many years to find product market fit, which never ends. Product market fit is something that you always need to be striving for product market fit. So it's continuing to stay close to customers, to the market, seeing the future, living in the future.
And then how did you meet your fellow co-founders?
Yeah, so friends here in Charleston. So it was, again, Nate, who I mentioned in the beginning, was the first person who he worked with a bunch of e-commerce stores. It was, hey, Nate, sit down, click this button. I want to see your reaction. But yeah, it was personal network here in Charleston, and just keeping close ties as we go along. are whether it's separate paths or same path, but I still have several folks that I've worked with in previous careers at Elevar today as well.
And so are you all part of it today? Are you still together?
Yeah, so Nate still, he's fairly, I'll say, more back office, legal operations, accounting, things like that. He's not in the day-to-day Elevar other than helping with the things and doing the things that a normal CEO or team just doesn't want to spend their time on. So it's been I think from Nate's, he's whenever he's explains this part of it, I always laugh because he's a funny, like the funny description of it. So yeah, he's very involved, but not in necessarily like the normal day to day that you'd expect of the founder. He's not in product, he's not in engineering or customer success. That was 2 or 3 years ago, and it's like, all right, we gotta, one of us has to go because we're not making any money. Like, we got to pick a path, like, go. And it was me. It was really my baby. So I'm gonna ride my baby and see how far I can take Elevar.
Yeah. And then obviously Inc. 5000 2 years running is not bad. Um, so so then so yeah, so I was kind of going to ask that a little bit as well, which is, so now that you're building, Elevar, you've got this customer that you're really targeting and service. You're doing a really good job on the feedback. Plus, I think you're building a very strong brand, and you got these great customers. Uh, where do you sort of see yourself, Elevar, going in the next couple of years?
Yeah. So my thought on the future of Elevar is the market that we are in. So there's a concept of blue ocean or red ocean. So blue ocean is,
Yes.
the market's very new. There aren't many players in there versus a red ocean. Think project management tools like Monday, Asana, Notion, etc. Very much a red ocean, a ton of competition. Elevar historically, and partly because we've navigated across different markets over the last 5 years, but historically, I would categorize our market as more blue ocean than red ocean. Where I see Elevar moving is the market is starting. Actually, the market is, but the market's pulling us forward and pulling the solutions that we offer out of other competitors or new folks that are coming into the space. So to me, it's not necessarily we're moving to a red ocean per se, but it's 3 years ago me talking about server side tracking or the conversion APIs. Those that were really, I would say, advanced in tracking and how they could use that to their advantage in Facebook. They loved it. They're all about it. The average ecom manager or brand, they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Doesn't seem, I'm not reading anything about it, so I don't need to do anything about it. Now I think it's okay, I heard that. I know we need to do something different. I know we're losing out tracking. I know the impact it has on my business. So for me, that's the long answer of, we have scratched the surface in terms of market potential. And now that the market is maturing, I feel it's okay, we need to, for some reason, all I think of is a balloon analogy of blow the balloon up to like to take more space in our market and just continue to do a lot of what we've been doing, but add some firepower to do some things like cross platform, other aspects that we have not focused on to date.
It is a pretty interesting opportunity. The Blue Ocean Red Ocean, that was a great book. It was actually recommended to me first by Dave Crisco, who is the original founder of New Horizon, which was the company that then turned into Club Penguin. You might have
Oh
heard
yeah, yeah,
of like Lane Merrifield and Lance Preeb. So Dave Crisco is the original founder, and he yeah, so he recommended that book, and it's been a really great book for us. When we first started Street Text, we were this library of ad funnels, right? Like, you could launch campaigns quickly and easily to attract customers, and it was so new, it was almost too new, right? I
yeah,
remember in 2014 when we launched this, we're like, we didn't even know what category we were,
yeah.
and that's because we were like creating this new category, and it was a lot of fun. Like, it was really, really cool. But remember, we would sit around and we'd be like, why is nobody else doing this? Why is nobody else doing this? Well, fast forward to 2023.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And the world has changed.
yeah,
Um, and we're definitely, I'd say we're playing well into Orange Ocean, Red Ocean.
Yeah.
There's a lot of companies that have essentially seen this as an effective strategy, and they're also doing it. And so what we ended up building, it's same thing, kind of similar process to you, which is we're looking at like we're always kind of thinking, okay, how do we make whatever the problem is that we have, how do we solve it in a way that makes things better? How do we make it easier for our customer? And being that we really are an ad platform, so it's like really a platform designed for launching ads, managing ads, optimizing those ads. um, we realized that remarketing was something that it just isn't done very effectively on Facebook. And so we've created this whole remarketing platform. And then once again, all of a sudden you're back in that space where you're like, there's nobody else doing it. And there's lots of remarketing platforms out there, but there's nobody that's doing it this way. And so it's funny because even on LinkedIn, they're like, hey, who are like your two closest competitors? Because putting the product out on LinkedIn. And you're like, there's like literally nobody that does this. There's nobody that allows you to sync your audiences automatically to Facebook and all the things that we do um through the remarketing. And it's funny when you yeah, so the blue ocean strategy I think is really important. It's like you always gotta I think as long as you're serving your customer and you're keeping the ear close, like what you were describing, you're always going to put yourself in a blue ocean naturally. Like it's going to happen. But then the other side of it is, I don't know if you heard the talk by the Wistia guy. His whole concept, which was like it's easy to underestimate the market that you're in. It's easy to underestimate the size of the space. And so the part that I always struggle with is like sometimes I want to out innovate, but just to realize that the space that you're in is still growing and is growing
Yeah.
quite quickly. And
Yeah.
so to really make sure that the value you've created is now capitalizing on that value essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. The market is not always bigger than you expected or thinking. I think I've fallen into that trap in my past of thinking, the market's pretty small and that's not there yet. So even today, it's a good reminder to realize like that's the market potential is much bigger than what we think.
Oh, it's massive. It's absolutely massive. Like think, okay, there's like 10 plus million businesses advertising at any given second. Every single one of those businesses need to track their data. Um, like 99%, 99.999%, unless they're using Elevar, don't have
Yeah.
great data, right? They
Yeah.
don't have great insight into what's happening. And yeah, so think how many people are waking up at this very moment thinking to themselves, like, how do we solve this problem? And they're going to their CMO and their CMO is scratching their head and they're not sure. And
Yeah.
so it's a very big problem.
Yeah.
And so I think about that all the time. It's just like how big the opportunity really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Very
execution.
fascinating.
Yeah. Execution is where the magic is at. If you can out execute.
Yes, totally. So we're wrapping up here, being conscientious of the time, your time, I just want to say thank you, man. I really appreciate this. This is really I love chatting to you. What would be something
Yeah. Likewise.
yeah, it's so good. So what would be a piece of advice that you would, if you could go back in time and meet yourself 20 years ago, what would be something that you would tell yourself then that you from the years that you've learned today?
A couple of thoughts off the top of my head. So if I were to go back 20 years, so 20, I would tell myself if you can focus and execute from age of 20 to 30 on finding a problem, reading, getting mentors, doing I feel like all the things I've been doing 30 to 40, the I would set myself up for a life that I don't even know is possible or as I could even fathom. So I think that's one is just realizing that life is long. Like if most from 2025 they want to do X, Y, and Z and probably not think about work too much, just have fun. But man, you can really get ahead if you zing or zag when everyone else is doing their thing. Uh, yeah, I think that would be one piece of advice of just have the discipline and just focus for that first decade, the 20 to 30, like post school decade. I'd say the other one that goes along with that I think a lot about today, especially is I'm 41 and interact with others that are in their 20s and 30s. Man, stuff just doesn't happen overnight, and I feel like there's more of that expectation of I do something for 6 months or a year, and then everything's going to happen for me or happen to me. But it really is the successes. They're just some bricks stacked up over days, weeks, months, years. So it's you got to think in decades, not in weeks or months. And I think that would be the other piece of advice I would tell myself is just if you start a company, don't expect you to have a unicorn in a year and have all these accolades. Maybe in 10 years, if you get really lucky and you are persistent and disciplined, but things don't happen in months; they happen in years or decades.
Yes. That great quote by, was it Steve Jobs? Every overnight success story has a 10-year backstory.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, this is Brad, I just want to say thank you so much. I really appreciate this. This has been great. I'm sure it's been really interesting for a lot of people. And I like it. Like it's interesting when you share your story because it's an interesting journey. And business is
Yeah.
a journey for everyone listening. And as you probably know, because you're part of it. And it's the little things that happen along the way that end up making the
Yeah.
incredible the incredible platter that ends up being our plate later in life, and we get to
Yeah.
look at that and just say, "Wow, and what a journey! What a fun ride this has been."
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so
Yeah.
much, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Jonathan. Appreciate it.